perestroika in the Soviet Union in 1989, Gorbachev and his team realized finally that economically the model was not doing justice. They have not had great success in the last 10 years turning it around into prosperity, but clearly continuing with that model might not have made them competitive globally. And the new president looks like a very energetic, determined young person who will rebuild the country maybe over 2 terms of office. We are seeing peaceful revolutions in progress all over the place. It's not ending. Germany, Vietnam, the fantastic change in South Africa from a possible racial bloodbath to a multiracial democracy. Vietnam got reunited, Koreas are talking, and looks like Kashmir may be settled this year. So in the light of all these global changes, the end of the Cold War, the end of, in a way, extreme kinds of ideological straitjackets, we were also able to rediscover in India. We had some idea of the market. Fortunately, we ran a mixed economy rather than an entirely command economy. There was some scope for advertising and marketing, not enough. Indian managerial, marketing, advertising knowledge always ran ahead of the system, opportunities and constraints. But now we are also rediscovering entrepreneurship. Particularly, it is shining already in this city, in the field of IT. It will come in biotechnology. The recent textile policy talks about rejuvenating the old Indian textile industry, a quintessential old economy industry. We're talking about an export target of $50 billion by 2010, only 2 years behind IT, which is 2008. There is also stress on initiative, individual, NGO, cooperative, corporate initiative, as well as a sense of partnership rather than adversarial relationship between government and business at the center and the state. Let's go to the privatization area, why it is essential. There are compulsions why all countries needed to look at privatization, even old believers in it like England, France, Germany, because of the poor returns on massive investments, about 1 to 1.5%. The profits of about 20 enterprises are wiped out by the losses of another 200. Underutilization of human and physical resources. We can ill afford, already a resource-short country, coming late to industrialization. Government-run infrastructure has been a drag. Power cuts, poor roads, port handling capacity for export growth, tourism infrastructure. In many areas, the economy, jobs, revenue, consumers, citizens have suffered in our attempt to back inefficient state-run enterprises. We can use the proceeds of privatization to reduce the public debt in interest comments. Those of you who follow the annual budget would have noticed that in every budget of the finance minister, something like 35 to 40% goes in interest payments on the rising public debt. Therefore, obviously, not much is left for social, human developmental expenditure. But there is resistance. There are turfs in political power, bureaucratic administrative power, as well as within the public enterprises, people not able to transcend and look at the total national interest, preference for the status quo, and insecurity. But this is going. The public sector banking industry, as you can see in the press, is going through a massive VRS scheme, and the managements are astounded by the kind of response. The State Bank of India has got twice the numbers that they wanted in half the time that they expected. There is a huge communication gap about the benefits of privatization, that how by unlocking the value caught up in these enterprises, we can massively benefit the nation in building physical, social, human infrastructure. And I think some group of people need to communicate this creatively and go better than the advertising profession. Globalization, as I said earlier, is partly on the merits of our export and import benefits for India. Many industries have been modernized with modern technology, new equipment, and also Indian exports are growing at a healthy 18 to 20% per annum in the last 10 years since liberalization, and partly we are going on WTO compulsions. There, of course, we can negotiate. We're building alliances, such as with Chris Patten and the EU. There is ambivalence too foreign direct investment as well as technology. This is true in all countries, but gradually as we build our own domestic capability, this will reduce. But there is a huge asymmetry. Clearly, Indian business is at a disadvantage. Ideally, if we had liberalized 20 years ago and allowed Indian business to build scale, research and development, you might have seen the CII speech of Mr. Brar, Ranbaxy MD yesterday, that Indian industry has just raised R&D investment from 2% of sales to 4%, whereas majors like Pfizer and Merck spend up to 15%. Similarly, we have not built brands, which is a major competitive advantage or disadvantage if we don't have it, and there has not been enough investment in human resource development, both at a macro as well as at a micro level. So since we are coming with this kind of asymmetry, every profession in India, R&D scientists, human resource development people, and advertising and marketing people have to be super competent, better than the best elsewhere in the world, to enable India to overcome this asymmetry and establish some kind of a balance. We also have the handicaps of poor infrastructure. On the global competitiveness index, we rank low, only ahead of some African countries. On the corruption index also we are high. It is not that the Indian society, culture, the Indian psyche, the gene is corrupt in any way. It is a system of licenses, controls, permits, various kinds of inspections that breach this. Wherever we have removed them, the corruption has come down dramatically. So the result of many of these things is that we are low on competitiveness. Let me now come to technology, which is very rapidly changing lives all over the world, overcoming national sovereignty, making it difficult for nation states, regions, communities to erect any kind of a defensive barrier. Today, the most relevant economist is no longer Marx, not even Keynes, who was very popular between the war and about 1980. Certainly he was an improvement on Adam Smith in bringing about relevant government intervention in activating unemployed resources, moving from underemployment towards full employment, but there were also dangers of inflation, as well as a lower work culture and excessive dependence on the state. The economists whose ideas are now going through a revival, renaissance, and global acceptance was Schumpeter, who understood the Indian philosophy of the inevitability of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, creation, sustenance, and at some point inevitable destruction, the old giving place to the new. And he contended quite rightly that in the long run, that national and global economy will succeed, which is able to cope with the dynamism of technology, innovation, adaptation, replacement of old machinery, old products and processes. And this is taking place at a rapid rate. So the destruction is not negative, it can be very creative as long as we are replacing it with something that is better for all the stakeholders concerned. Also, speed has now become very important even in the technology process. R&D is now adopting the mantra of project, R&D time frames from the zero date to the delivery with milestones. Many of you here would be familiar with the Moore's Law, which talks about the accelerating pace of change, that things will become simpler, cheaper. Computers will at some point become general voice-based, friendly. There are now innovations such as simultaneous multi-language translation. Before we finish talking about e-commerce, we are into m-commerce, mobile commerce. There is convergence taking place, all technologies together, not only computer, telephone, but broadcasting, cable, radio, satellite radio, the next major change. You can have it fitted on top of a car, any instrument in the house, perhaps the clearest decibels of sound. The 20th century saw IT revolution. Scientists are now predicting the 21st century will see biotech revolution. It will be in this century as much a wealth creator as IT has been in the last century. Applications in plant, human, as well as animal breeding. Now let me come to civil society, which is both the beneficiary as well as the victim of these economic and technological changes. And it is a challenge to all managements, all functions, including advertising, how we can make sure that in reality and in public perception, the benefits outweigh considerably the costs. One of the major learnings around the world and in India is there is less glorification of the state. The state will not wither away. It should not wither away. It has a very important role to play, but the role is significantly changing. The state as a facilitator, as a supporter, as a creator of some of the basic foundations for health, literacy, human welfare, physical infrastructure, whereby the economy can perform. There is also less deification of science and technology. The disasters of the 20th century, the nuclear weapons, biological and chemical weapons, several wars, the damage to the ecological environment, the physical stress and strain of people is making us much less idealistic about science than people were in the 19th century and early 20th century. Here again, science is relevant. We cannot do without it, but there has to be much greater selectivity, evaluation, questioning of science, and advertising has a role in promoting the right kind of science and in discouraging the more destructive varieties of science. Through credit, empowerment, entitlement, variety of ideas have come, and the strongest segment is society. This is a very old Indian civilizational idea, the village republic. The king was not all powerful over the people. He was a servant of the people. He had a duty to go incognito and look around. The king was respectful to scholars. Thought leadership and spiritual leadership were the anchors of society. And in our recent times, Gandhi and Jayaprakash Narayan have brought about this awareness that Lokniti, the politics of the people, must drive Rajniti, the politics of the state. The public is more demanding now, and on the state they are asking for good governance. No party, no personality is sacred, or they're all biting the dust election after election. There is a severe drubbing that is given. People are also looking for devolution. The Panchayati Raj amendments, as well as the Women's Bill, various other levels, Finance Commission, the devolution of resources of the state. And people are asking for total quality of life, that all-round physical, economic, cultural, aesthetic, and spiritual opportunities for development. Benefiting. Is it benefiting the rich, the elite, the companies, the MNCs, or how quickly can we make sure that the reform benefits reach the middle, lower middle, and the poor? Now, in the light of these, we can look at the key issues in advertising. There's no question that there is tremendous potential power, latent power in advertising. This may not always be brought out. This may not be always used in the most effective, in the most mature and responsible way, but there's no question that there is power in advertising. We as a country failed to use it adequately for 40 years. We are now willing to look at it with a more objective mind. Then the challenge is the advertising profession to act responsibly and competently in the light of the larger allocations for advertising that firms are making, governments are making as well. There are also hazards perceived in advertising. But as an observer of advertising, you will permit me, give me the indulgence that I recount some of these. This is on an exhaustive list. The single biggest change the advertising world is facing worldwide is a revolution in the media. There is almost a fear sometimes that the media is taking over the communication job and advertising is playing a more subsidiary role. Let's look at the power of advertising. It is awesome. We foolishly denied ourselves. It was considered inessential in my consulting experience. As late as 1990, I had some directors of finance of consumer and consumer durable companies who used to tell me, Dr. Athreya, in our capital budget, I can understand where the money goes when we put it into a factory. I can see the building, plant and machinery. I even understand R&D. because occasionally we see a new product or process, but please tell me, where does the money go which we put into advertising? They can't get their hands on it. This kind of a lack of understanding even within the top management, much less in the civil service, among the planners. Not allowed for pricing formula in many cases, not recognized as an essential cost of doing business and reaching the customer. It can be a booster rocket. Our ultimate aim is corporate performance, and the factor that will deliver it, single most important factor, is business strategy. And in a liberalizing, globalizing economy, the key business strategy is marketing. There are others like finance, HR, but marketing with the customer as the most important stakeholder, and behind marketing, in the marketing mix, advertising today as a very key component. But despite those periods of planning, control, statism, we had pioneers in every field, pioneers in technology, pioneers in finance, who talked about the need for cost consciousness, margins, return on capital employed, some kind of an imputed market capitalization. Today, EVA, shareholder wealth are coming back. It's the same old set of concepts. Likewise, in the advertising field, there were pioneers, as the chairman mentioned. I.S. Peerboy was fearless among them. Ghoshal, Iyer, Sengupta, Padamsee, the list is not complete. They kept the flame alive, the ideas alive, traveling around the world, comparisons, but holding the frustration that all that one knows about a particular field cannot be fully deployed in this environment. But today we are getting some of that environment. There has been historically a tussle in advertising, as I have seen in many companies, between the creative side and the service side. For a long time, creativity was dominant. The cost-plus economy and the limited advertising budget gave priority to creativity, but today, relationships, strategy, delivering solutions to customers, marketing, communication solutions become very important. We have seen some epic battles, Nirma and Serve, and there was a beautiful incident last year, 1998. I was in the Nirma Institute of Management delivering their annual institute lecture. And a few months after that, Karsanbhai Patel had invited K.T. Dadiseth to come and deliver the convocation address. It was a magnificent Dharma Yudh between two great men, and Dadiseth praised to his students of Nirma that if they wanted any lesson in management and entrepreneurship, it was standing before them, very handsomely acknowledging what levers had learned from Nirma and some of the products developed here being taken to other international markets of Unilever. And Patel from his side acknowledging the importance of institution building, systems, HRD, transition management for the future. We have seen big battles in the toothpaste market, variety of brands, and leaders like Colgate facing a tough battle. Some new ones which brought in traditional themes like promise, fading away. That's the real idea of creative destruction, the Shiva Schumpeter economics. Nobody is guaranteed permanence except when they can meet the needs of the customer, the changing expectations of the customer. We have had many advances in the advertising competences. Variety of themes have been brought in, and the idea of number of equities which advertising can build and support, which are now changing the finance functions concept of the balance sheet. The intangible assets are in many cases becoming larger than the tangible assets on the balance sheet. Advertising has not stayed with business. Beginning with about mid-80s, we have seen advertising being used as a campaign tool in politics, in many of the elections, in social causes like literacy, polio elimination, prenatal, antenatal care, family planning. Now the campaign against plastic bags, environment, the power of advertising is being used, and government is using it in many of its schemes. There are also a number of hazards, and many of you would be vaguely, occasionally feeling discomfort about it, but these keep coming up again and again. There is one overall perception that advertising in some way contributes to consumerism, and it's not the fault of entirely the advertising profession, but It may create an atmosphere in which there is conspicuous consumption, there is excess. You may have seen a recent report by the World Watch Institute that because of the developments in green revolution, biotechnology, the world is getting divided into two halves, one which does less work and is overfed, and hunger is being replaced by heart attack as the main danger in life, and the other half, which despite a lot of hard work, doesn't get enough to eat. Obesity is beginning to affect half the population in the world. And in advertising, the feeling that not all that is being said is true, and neither the whole truth is being spoken, and the customer has to find out in a variety of ways. Some people go far. I asked a professor of marketing from the US, what do you think of ethics in advertising? And his response was, it is an oxymoron. I put a question mark. I don't entirely subscribe to that view. The influence of advertising on the youth sometimes is not wholesome. It may act as a westernizer, a cultural agent. One of the hazards of globalization is a monoculture, the destruction of indigenous languages, ways of living, and a broad westernization, Americanization, food, variety of habits, the rise of Valentine's Day in India, for example. So many things that worry people. It triggers at the individual level, in some cases, feelings of inadequacy, selfishness, anomie, that means the breakdown